Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of DeFacto Review. Today is December 25th, so Merry Christmas to all of people celebrating in Mongolia and abroad. And as always, we have here with us DeFacto Jargal. Good evening, Ms. Jargal.
Hello.
Let's see what our topics are for tonight.
Will Mongolia default in 2017? Development Bank of Mongolia urgently needs 1 trillion Turkic investment. Did the Dalai Lama visit Mongolia for the very last time?
Our first topic is obviously the most pressing issue facing Mongolia today, which is the economic crisis and the government's plan to recover from this. The most pressing issue is the first sovereign bond Mongolia issued on the international market, which is $580 million bonds the Development Bank of Mongolia issued in 2012. And this will mature next year in March 21st. And there's a lot of questions, doubt whether DBM will be able to pay back these Mongolia's first sovereign bonds. Since it's the first, it's paying it back. It will be a major test of Mongolia's ability to govern and spend these commercial international loans. So there's a couple of government recovery plans that government is implementing, which is borrowing soft loans from countries such as China, Kuwait, Japan, and Russia, countries which our foreign minister visited, and also the Speaker of Parliament has just visited the Russia and Arab states just last week. And the next option is taking the standby agreement from the International Monetary Fund, and the amount that Mongolia might take is being rumored to be between $1 billion and $1.5 billion of loans, of soft loans, and the first decision might come in as early as January, and these, if according to goes to plan, we might be able to take this money by spring. The other big issue is, will Mongolia be able to move forward the major projects, such as, in particular, Tavantolgoy coking coal mine, and currently the old consortium that won the tender is negotiating a new deal with the government of Mongolia. The three parties in this consortium are Mongolian Mining Corporation, listed in Hong Kong, and from the Chinese side, the state-owned China Xinhua Corporation, and from Japan, Sumitomo Corporation. The details of these negotiations are not clear yet, but the government gave a directive to Erdnes Tavantolgoy, which holds the license to this coal mine, that ETT must at least hold 51% of whatever new deal might come out of these negotiations. The other option that was recently developed is last week's government cabinet meeting decided to amend the current law on banks and to make it able for foreign banks to open branches in Mongolia. The government cabinet resolution meeting memo said that currently 4 international banks have sent requests to open a branch in Mongolia. Obviously, one of them is the state-owned Bank of China, and the other one that's been mentioned is the German Deutsche Bank. The other one is a project that the government is proposing to move forward is the Gatsurt gold deposit. The government decided to move this forward a very long time ago, but it's being stalled due to a local court contention. So the government said that next year they'll be able to move this major gold deposit forward. So my question to you, Jargal, is how do you rate the current government's economic recovery plan? And do you think they'll be able to implement these issues so that Mongolia will not default come March?
None of them that much will be implemented very fast. Nevertheless, we have to pay the debt on bond in March. So there will be quite timing issue on that. That means we are to be ready for facing major austerity steps that the government must take. Either they take it from now in a planned way, or they have to do it one day very sharply, which may cause major, maybe instability, big strike, etc. So we are to be ready for the sort of austerity measures, which should start from saving all costs, having all cost unnecessary cut as much as possible. I don't think for a long run the government will be able, if the money situation is as it now, it will not be able to continue borrowing from domestic market. From international market, it's already not possible because this country got more than it can digest. And domestic market, they keep borrowing, and the commercial banks are buying only 3 months, 6 months government bonds with very high rate, about 17 to 18%, which is way higher than the commercial banks loan.
Right.
So now government should not sell, central bank should not allow Mongolian banks to buy it. Instead, the capital market better to buy, so that also individuals can buy, etc. This is the first thing. Second, I think we should try to use consumer goods produced in Mongolia, vegetables, whatever you can do it. And plus, it's also food security issues. And third is we should understand the growing. We should feel the growing awareness of Chinese foreign policy today. And it looks like we need to go to ask many things from Beijing, like we did before with Moscow. So that's the situation, unfortunately, we're going to face in the very short term, near future. And as far as the banks concerned, I don't think the 4 banks that requested to open office here, a branch here, was requested 2 or 3 years ago. Now I don't think it's the right time. Everybody will be jumping in now. I don't think it is so. And as far as Bank of China is concerned, this is a state-owned bank. So when banks are owned by state, it is not just ordinary commercial bank. So that's the situation where we Mongolians should think over again. Can we do it without China? Can we survive without China, etc.? So we need to be more creative, innovative. Maybe we create some products that we sell over China and Russia, etc. So it's a time of big challenges coming.
So obviously, if you were to borrow from China, the one obvious thing that they will demand is allow Bank of China to be able to branch here. Probably just one of the many requirements that they will force us to take.
And the process with the state-owned Xinhua coal company, altogether we are now dealing with a huge Chinese commercial bank, huge Chinese corporation that is owned by state. So this is our reality. And we have to be very creative here, not because we are in economic crisis. We have a very not good situation now. But it doesn't mean that we select everything so cheap. So it is long-term, short-term balancing issue.
One of the ironic things is that the same consortium came into an agreement with the previous government, but the parliament shot it down, citing some concerns such as over dependence on China. So the situation might have become even worse now. We are even more dependent on China, and we are losing any other options besides going to China for any kind of assistance.
Nevertheless, I think this sort of solutions, this sort of agreement should go through the parliament. It should be approved by the parliament, not like the internet deal.
Right.
So recently, our government, Mongolian the leaders, tend to do it without parliament, which is the key for the democratic country.
Right.
So we do expect that it will go through parliament, through proper discussions, not unlike that. Remember the loan agreement with Chalco?
Right.
They were so much in a hurry that they made such a bad price deal, and now still they said now they increased a little bit, still it is 6 times less than the world market price. So really it shows that Mongolians are not very good, in particular government people not good with negotiating skills.
Right. So our next topic is the Development Bank of Mongolia, which was created in early 2012, during the time when the Mongolian People's Party were in power. And they issued Mongolia's first sovereign bond, which was $580 million bond. And last week, Parliament plenary session had a heated discussion over the financial situation of Development Bank of Mongolia. And the government requested the parliament to urgently inject 1 trillion tugrik into the bank so that the balance of their own assets and the amount of loans that they gave out is more balanced. Let me give you some of the statistics. The DBM gave in the last 5 years 5.9 trillion tugrik of loans to around 2,000 projects, but the key concern now is the ability of those borrowers to be able to pay back those loans. And according to the Parliament working group, a government working group who did an audit of the bank, 70% of these loans are in danger of becoming non-performing loans, and 50 out of all these loans, 54.6%, or around 3.2 trillion tugriks of those loans must need to be invested in 16 projects, and the ability of those borrowers is quite low. And so in this situation, when the development bank, 70% of their loans are in danger of becoming non-performing loans, and the key criticism was that DBM spent all these money outside of the budget without much government oversight, and now their asset size is even close to the government's budget now. So how do you see the situation developing around DBM? And there's one criticism is that DBM gave a lot of loans to companies related to politicians. And the criticism in last week's plenary session was, this was from an MPP, a long-time member of parliament, who criticized the government and parliament for being awkwardly, suspiciously silent on who actually took out these loans. And his concern point was that because a lot of politicians from both big parties took out these loans, they're hesitant to be able to declare the actual borrowers. How do you see the situation growing?
As you said, half of the loan by Development Bank, which is around 6 trillion tugriks, but half of them, more than half of them are to be paid back from the budget. So they have given to companies, to projects that is to be paid at the end from the budget. So that's why for years we have been discussing that now we kind of have 2 budgets now in the country. So finally they have get together into one balance, and still it shows our budget deficit is a huge deficit is coming because we have now finally united, which was rightly so.
Of course.
But out of this 7 total trillion tugriks asset of this bank, or about 6, as we have seen, is given to the loan. Less than now they need at least 1 billion to increase the quality of the owners' equity. And currently this owners' equity, just owners' equity itself, is 250 billion tugrix, which they ask to increase 4 times so that they have the threshold of 1 trillion tugrix, so that they can leverage on that to probably all the way to the 10. You know, this development bank should be under the law of banking in Mongolia. And that law shows when you have a bad loan qualified like this, which is not paid, say, more than 6 months, nothing is paid back, then they qualify in that way, and then they create a risk fund reserve, risk reserve. Whether it is done or not, the inspection group did not say. If they did not, then question is why. Because it is paid by the budget later on, will be paid, doesn't mean that it's so, it has such a guarantee. Another concern is about this 2,000 projects we talk about. And
Sounds too many.
They went in 3 ways. First went straight from the development bank to larger, several groups. For example, the total 1.4 trillion tugrix were given directly to railways, 15, all the industry related to the power, heating, 22, the manufacturing, 446 trillion tugrix were given. It's billion tugrix were given to 5 companies, and there are 2 cement factories, and etc. etc. The particular names can be companies' names. The problem is also in this country, all smaller, big, somehow related to the politicians. And in particular, when it's bluntly related, and if they made a certain contribution towards making decisions, they had the impact on making final decisions, bank loan officers, then departments. That's the concern, and we don't know who and how it made. So that's why the parliament members are not happy, of course, and many of them are related to these companies, of course. The other 1.2 trillion tugrix were given through the banks. Out of 14 commercial banks in the country, 8 of them were taking the loans, but the 30% of all loans through these commercial banks went through Qolumtu Bank for 340 billion, and Trade and Development Bank, 28%. So these 2 banks together, almost 60% of the loans went through these banks. Remember that these banks, these loans are for long term, from 7 to 8%, whether it is tugrix or dollar. The same, because the cost was less. The third one was through the many projects like Ulaanbaatar city, streets, roads in the country. For roads, 1.2 trillion tugrix loan was given, and out of them, 2/3 went to the countryside, between cities. IMAX, the road went on, and then 1/3 went to the capital city. And plus there are several projects, as you know, street projects. They made nice, the crossroads. I mean, etc., etc. 2.7 trillion tugrix were used for that purpose. And very strange thing is, for example, for railroad, new railroad, they said 347 billion tugrix loan was given, and non-single kilometer of road is made yet. And yet this money had disappeared. So Mongolia, what Mongolia is doing is, a country like Mongolia could borrow more development loans, which is 2-3% for 40, 50 years of maturity. And this is the things they should use. But however, because our bad governance, because this possibility for many companies to get public money through less scrutiny, etc., etc., today 70% of the total loan of the development bank is of bad quality, which is very, very dangerous. Bad situation. And now at the end, who is paying? Everybody is paying. And this paying is more, payment is coming very hard for lower income people through tax, through the increase of prices. So we are going through this year, next year, early next year, several severe economic financial situation.
And since this is the first sovereign bond Mongolia ever issued, it's very important in the eyes of investors of the ability of the Mongolian government to be able to pay back these loans on time.
But
we
let's
can always
be realistic. Without finding other debt, the government cannot pay. It's unrealistic that we, in 3 months, we pay $580 million US.
Right.
It's impossible. So now they go for other loans, for, as you have mentioned, several sources. But the issue is, unless we change the way the government is run, then no matter how much we receive more money as a debt, doesn't help Mongolia.
So a lot of decisions need to be made, agreements need to be made in the next 3 months for Mongolia to be able to pay back its first ever sovereign bond. Our next issue is a hot topic, not just in Mongolia, but also in the international diplomacy scene. This is related to the Dalai Lama's recent visit to Mongolia and the subsequent action measures that the Chinese government has taken. The obvious explicit ones are Chinese side postponed several trilateral meetings between Mongolia and China indefinitely. Included in these negotiations were a soft loan in the amount of $4.2 billion, which is now indefinitely postponed. One interesting thing is that the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson initially said Mongolia is acting very naive when it comes to diplomacy. We should learn from our mistakes and take actions to rectify our mistakes. Perhaps in response to that, our foreign minister, Mr. Mukherjee, recently gave an interview to a local newspaper saying that the Mongolian government regrets that the Dalai Lama visited and the subsequent events that happened. And a lot of international media has covered his next comment, which was that the current government, as a policy, will not invite Dalai Lama or actually allow him to enter, whether it's for religious, even for religious purposes. And after this, the Chinese MFA also made another statement that Mongolia must learn from these mistakes and do everything it can to improve the standing between the two countries. So one interesting, for me, one of the recent criticism of the situation is that question marks is that did the government actually know and willingly allow him to enter, or agents within the government secretly allowed him to enter? And obviously they're blaming one person behind the second option, which is they're blaming the president for meddling in the affairs of government. According to our constitution, our diplomatic international affairs are divided between the government and the president. And since the government and the president are from two different parties, the cohesiveness of Mongolia's diplomatic stance is coming into question. One interesting thing is that the current Dalai Lama, in the last couple of years, I believe, he said that there might not be a 15th Dalai Lama, and his age is also he's aging person. I think he's believing in his 70s. So, in the case that there won't be a next Dalai Lama, there's a question whether this was the last Dalai Lama's last visit to Mongolia. How do you see the situation?
Well, Dalai Lama is now 83 years old and quite senior person. But my thought is, it's becoming increasingly difficult, our relations with China. China is imposing more conditions and terms. And now I have a domestic questions for our president. And in fact, I asked the president to go out and explain to the public, because we don't see that it is just a matter of individual action by one council at our embassy in Tokyo, which was, there was a news that he was fired.
Right.
But it is not that easy issue. It shows Mongolian anti-corruption agency, police, intelligence agency, right?
Right.
The third court, these four major power agencies are very much divided. They are not united. And it's big concern at this time of hardship, difficulties, if this all force institutions are divided, then it's not good, not at all. So our president is to, I think, to make clear that suspicion that he is behind the visit of Dalai Lama to the country, and if he is, then she should tell why and why not.
Right.
So that's big concern, and it shows, if it is the case that president is doing different than the government,
right,
just like so much against each other, then an issue comes whether Mongolia is also in a political crisis or not, along with this economic crisis we face. If
division of power issue.
If it is, when now the default or the sort of hard times comes, we're going to face even worse situation, because there will not be single unified actions in the country. But nevertheless, Mongolia should go ahead, and Mongolia also should be very smart with the negotiations with China on this Tavan Tolga issues.
Right.
We should not be in a hurry making decisions like last time, remember, this Chalco made this contract. So all these things...
$350 million prepayment.
Yeah, so we need to be even now more smarter and more united, more clear, and every sort of decisions are to be made through Parliament. At the end, it's legally elected people to represent whole Mongolia.
Right.
Only the Parliament has this representation power. So.
And it's important to note that ironic that the first Tavan Tolga deal was shut down because of criticism over Chinese over increasing their influence, and the new negotiations happening with the same consortium at the same time.
The other concern among Mongolian ordinary people is the information that China had made a law that says, that justifies military intervention when they found Chinese interests are attacked in us and other sovereign countries. So if it is true, and it is a question for Chinese-speaking people to find out the law, that if Chinese interests are somewhere, say first of all in Mongolia, then somehow there is something happening with the businesses, and they can interpret it in different ways. It can be because it's state-owned, it's the state ownership, state interests is damaged or attacked, so they can. This is an issue that we should make clear.
All right. Unfortunately, we ran out of time for today, and I want to thank our viewers for tuning into 2016's last edition of DeFacto Review, and we want to wish everyone watching today a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, Happy Holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you,
Happy New Year. Thank you. Thank you.
And you could watch us, you were able to watch us live on Facebook as well. V Television is the name of the page, and please give your comments and suggestions for our next editions. So that's it. Good night, everyone, and a Happy New Year.
Bye.